I saw the pilot, and I was blown away by the pilot. You know, Alan Taylor directed it, Matt Weiner wrote it. It was for, at that time, a network I'd never heard of, AMC. I thought they only showed old movies. It was kind of, still basic cable was still kind of this new world. And, yes, The Shield had happened, and that had kind of started basic cable being a place to really direct. But there was a point where you didn't want to be directing there. Like, network TV was the gold standard. That has so changed now. I mean, it's like a total inverse that, that's not where the best work is anymore. It's on, premium cable and basic cable and Netflix streaming services, Hulu, so it's, what a big switch in our world. But I watched that pilot and I just loved it. I loved it. And I had just finished reading the David Halberstam's book, The 50s, about all the things that made us who we are in contemporary times. And I thought the Mad Men pilot just exemplified that. What was the behavior? What was the relationship between people? How were women treated? It just was all of the things that, a post-war culture was dealing with. And, and the book, The 50s, goes into the first fast food restaurants and Levittown. Everything was changing. I thought it just captured that time. And what a compelling lead character, who is not a good guy a lot of the time, but you can't help but like him and be compelled and moved by him. And I have to say, I think with Homeland, that I'm on now, is one of the first female characters who is as compelling and complicated and layered as a man, and not always likable, and that's exciting too. But I think Don Draper was just, this extraordinary guy who was not who he appeared to be.
How do you make a seemingly unlikable character so compelling?
Well, I think there are many things to like about all those characters, but they're not one thing. They feel real because they feel layered and as complicated as a real person, because nobody is one thing. Nobody is all, fantastic and wonderful and lovely all the time. There's all sorts of layers to who we are, and I think it feels very real, and I think men have been allowed to be that complicated more than women, and I think that's changing, like so many things are, in a good way. But I think Don was like the example of that kind of 50s man that had a lot of secrets, and was not who he appeared to be. And, had different kind of compartments of his life with his wife and family and at work and his lovers, and those were not at odds in his mind. That was perfectly acceptable. But that was also kind of the culture at the time too. And I think looking at advertising and how things were presented to the world was a great environment to look at that. And I think Matt wrote fantastic characters, and also it was brilliantly cast.
Talk about working with Matt.
He is, again, I feel like I've worked with these incredibly brilliant writers, and I had a really good experience working with him. He's very specific how he writes things. And and at first when I read a script and it's like, okay, he picks up the cigarette, he lights it, he takes 2 breaths, he looks out. A lot of the time as a director, I don't really pay much attention to that. I might not block the scene exactly as that's scripted. Well, to Matt, all of that's really important. And at first, I have to admit, I found that very constraining. And that's like paint by numbers. How do you figure out how to breathe life into that? Because that might not be the best way to block the scene. So what I ended up finding out about him, which I loved, was that you have to read all of that. And then I would go to him and say, okay, what if he doesn't light the cigarette and take 3 breaths? What if he goes up to the window and looks out? it's the same emotional beat. You know, I understand that's the beat you want. So if that was respected, and then I would do that, then it would be fine. So I found a way to work with him that I thought was very creative and really enjoyed. So, but I had to figure that out. It wasn't, you know, I included him in how I was thinking of shooting things, especially if I was going to go very much against what was scripted. Yeah, that was a show that shot in 7 days. Yeah, and you know, when you're doing a basic cable show, it's the same length script. You know, you don't have less to shoot. You know, so that was really shocking. I had not done a basic cable show before. You also get paid half of what you get paid in other forms. You know, which I remember calling my agent, going, "What happened? That's half." Oh, well, that's it. Oh, yeah. It still was worth it on every level. The material was amazing.
So how do you make up that extra day? What
You have to figure it out. Like, you know, they were very clear, this is the pie. You can cut that pie however you want to cut it, but you're not getting more pie. So you have to figure it out. Again, knowing what the dollar scene and the 25-cent scene is. What can I move through quickly? And they were also fine with not having a lot of coverage. So, you know, you could shoot something in a big wide shot and a raking shot, and, you know, and again, you had to pick the places where you felt like you needed more because of what the story was about. But I had that first episode I did, which was called 5G, was about Don Draper's real brother finding him. And it was heart-wrenching because finally the truth, this is in the first season, was just starting to come out, that he had this other life and that he was not who he appears to be. So of course that's right up my alley, and I loved that. And the actor who played his brother was just really heart-wrenching and very compelling, you know, because Don didn't want this person in his life. He could not be in his life. He had created a very tightly wound world. And one thing that undid that, it would all fall apart.
Yeah.
A lot of what the mother's behavior was, January Jones, was Matt's mother. And I remember, I don't even remember what episode it was in, that Betty was polishing like the table and then the chairs in the dining room, and the kids are in the TV room. And as she's polishing it, all of a sudden she picks up the chair and she throws it against the ground, and she like destroys the chair in like anger that you can't, it's like this internal rage. She doesn't even know where it's coming from. And the kids are in the TV room and look out and they're like, what? You know, mom has just lost her mind. And then she very calmly picks up all the debris and goes and throws it out. No explanation to the kids, no nothing. But that was something apparently his mother did. But that was so interesting to me as far as exploring character. Those very repressed sort of characters that, you know, she had no one to talk to about this. And she knew some things were going on. She couldn't put her finger on it. I mean, so interesting.